Hello and welcome back to Ruben Cut. Today I'm going to be talking about something that I've vaguely been putting off. Kind of, not really. But it needs to be addressed. Simply put, as the title says, some socialists should shut the fuck up. Now, more specifically, I'm referring to, of course, tankies, who are a brain disease, to put it simply. And there are alarmingly more of them than I would have anticipated. You see, recently, a lot of people, some of whom I previously thought were pretty good and on the money, have been saying some real wacky shit. So what's been going on in the world of socialists? Well, with inside the tiny demographic of Americans who actually would call themselves socialists, which is interestingly enough, not a Venn diagram that overlaps a ton with Democrats, like almost not at all, just a tiny bit. Some of them have been saying some profoundly stupid shit. Now, some of them have been saying profoundly stupid shit for a long time, like Caleb Maupin, who fortunately was outed as a weird sex pervert whose socialist organization would do things like prostitute their women for extra money. I mean, honestly, he sounds like a ridiculous gentleman from everything that's come out. But I already thought he was ridiculous because he would do bullshit like defend China and Russia, which we're going to come back to. Because that's the big thing here. I consider myself a democratic socialist. I believe in two things: democracy, equality. I'm sorry, wait, this is a list of four things. My bad. I believe in democracy, labor owning the means of production, individuality, and of course, equality. These are the basic fundamental things that I believe in. And I don't think any of those things are compatible with whatever the fuck tankies think they're doing. Because it's not. More distressingly, because I never liked Caleb Maupin and didn't give a shit about him at any point, really. I have come to hear from more prominent figures, more distressing prominent figures. You may be aware of Hassan Piker, a man who while I didn't always agree with him, always considered him entertaining and a step in the right direction. Someone who could really reach the meatheads who love Joe Rogan, you know? And I liked watching, Master Chef with him. That was fun. However, Hassan Piker recently was on the H3 podcast, where, when confronted by it, pussyfooted around the concept that he considers Taiwan to be part of China. Why, Hassan? Why would you think that? Fuck China? Why? Okay, listen. I can't even begin to understand why any socialists would ever support China. And I mean that. I can't even begin to wrap my head around how socialist values are compatible with China. Now, I know what you're going to say. Aren't the Chinese communists? Well, they call themselves the Communist Party, but I don't know where do we find the communism? Can you find it if I put up a picture of China? Could you be like, well, here's this thing is the communism? But they don't. Labor doesn't own the means of production in China. They don't. They have major, super rich oligarchs in China. The wealth is not redistributed to help those in need. No. So what's communism about? Well, they have a planned economy. That's just capitalism with extra steps, you dumb fuck. If the labor doesn't own the means of production, you never reach socialism. You didn't do it. If China was a workers' labor's like sanctuary or heaven or paradise, then why everybody jumping off the top of them? Off the top of them fucking Apple factories, trying to kill themselves. If what like that seems like a type of thing that unions would have better, solutions to. But China, last time I checked, doesn't even allow the formation of independent unions. But Ruben, they're the state. Well, yeah, like, what the fuck? I needed to go back. You see, we need to talk about tankies. Who the fuck are tankies? Well, tanky, originally a pejorative term created by socialists to call out and label authoritarian communists and socialists, has somehow, as of course, entered the mainstream vernacular now. But that is what a tanky is. Tankies are people who are pro-authoritarian socialism, which, like, what the fuck is that? Because authoritarianism itself tends to not be very democratic, doesn't necessarily it kind of doesn't imply the idea of that labor owns anything. Now, a lot of people have this idea that, oh no, but if the state owns it, then it's like the people own it. If the state communism is not real communism. It's not. What do I mean it's not? Well, because Marx said that when we got to communism, the final stage of the evolutionary scale that goes from capitalism to socialism to communism, we would dissolve the state. So the state itself is inherently not compatible with communism. At least not Marxist communism. But Ruben, what about Marxist-Leninism? Look, I've not studied Marxist-Leninism, but what I can tell you is this is bullshit made up by Stalin. Because Stalin wasn't a Leninist and he wasn't a Marxist. Stalin was a Stalinist. You think Stalin was going around going, yeah, the labor? No. Stalin was going around killing doctors because they were Jewish. Hilarious historical fact. If he hadn't gone around purging doctors for being Jewish or political opponents, he might not have died from that stroke. Oh, the hilarity of Stalin's fucking death. Stalin's authoritarianism made his guards so afraid of him that it took them hours to check on him when he had his stroke. Stalin was killed by his own authoritarianism, ultimately. See, let me back up, because I'm not done talking about socialists who need to shut the fuck up. Another socialist who apparently needs to shut the fuck up, that I previously thought made pretty cool content on YouTube, is a little channel called Second Thoughts, who made a video defending authoritarianism. Well, kind of. They basically just did a lot of whataboutisms about America, comparing the atrocities committed by America versus the atrocities committed by China and Russia in a very dishonest way. Look, you can't compare the people who are killed by regular police officers to the people who are killed by secret police. That's fucking stupid. And it's worth noting that there's a lot of fucked up reasons people are in jail in America, and we definitely should do something about our prison system. But we don't currently arrest anyone who is a political dissident. We don't arrest people for just thinking the government sucks. We don't. And we have yet to do that. Don't get me wrong, we've arrested people for political reasons, but typically they also had to do something arrestable. But Second Thought's video on authoritarianism reveals something else. The major problem with a lot of tankies is that they don't actually believe in anything. They don't actually have a basis or level of standard. Because once you believe that authoritarianism can be justified, it's over. Communism was never meant to be authoritarian. And the use of the idea of being authoritarian in quote unquote self-defense of your new state is bad. Stalin and Lenin never dissolved the state. They never gave up the power. They never achieved communism. They barely even did communism. If they were doing communism, they just would have given all the farms to the farmers instead of having all the farms run under the Ministry of Agriculture, or whatever the hell they called their Ministry of Agriculture, where the guy who led that made incredibly insane decisions that don't make sense. Do you know why so many people fucking starved in Russia? Because the agricultural heads of Russia didn't know shit about planting food. Instead, they did incredibly insane shit, like planting all the seeds in one spot so that the seeds would be stronger together, like communist labor, which not how seeds work. Not even remotely how seeds work. The insanity. And as a result, millions of people starved. They even did things like took pictures of farmers standing on piles of seeds to show how strong their Soviet seeds were. I bring that up because that's not socialist. In what version of socialism is there a dictator over the labor that controls everything the labor does? That doesn't sound like anything socialism has ever promised or suggested. And yet, these tankies, these supposed socialists, are out here defending these ridiculous, supposedly communist countries. And frankly, it's embarrassing. Because you see here, and this is important, and this goes mostly to Second Thought here. And for that matter, people like the Yankee Tanky, and I don't actually know to what extent Hassan is a tanky, but he's looking a little tanky these days. Well, with the whole defending Russia and China. We'll get back to that. It does not make you socialist to be anti-American. That does nothing to enhance socialism. In fact, it's irrelevant to socialism. In fact, being anti-anything is not a real ethical standard. If it's only bad when America does it, then how are you even measuring what's bad? Now, you could say that America has some hypocrisy, well, with all our claims to freedom and justice and whatnot. And we definitely do have hypocritical problems in this country. And America has a long history of doing profoundly fucked up shit. However, to just simply stand around and go, fuck America, regardless of any facts or details, is not a real stance. It's not a real belief system. It's tribalism. Because you see, there is a part of humanity deep down inside that wants to have enemies. Who knows why we have this? Maybe it comes from some deep-seated feeling that it makes us better than other people by comparison. But ultimately, I have to say, I see no reason that anyone on the left should ever be supporting China or Russia. Or even more embarrassingly, in certain situations, some people have been supporting Hamas, which is even worse, actually. It's much worse. And the reason it's much worse is, and you have to understand this, Hamas is bad. They are a military dictatorship that, once elected in Palestine, ended voting. They literally took away the ability to remove them from power peacefully. And then they're run by a guy who doesn't even live in Palestine. Are you fucking kidding me? Not only that, but they blatantly attacked civilians, which makes them either terrorists or war criminals. And neither of those are good. Neither of those are good. Both are bad. And if you are a leftist, let me be very clear. You can support Palestinians and their right to independence, if that's what you believe in, without supporting Hamas. Because the reality is that the idea that the enemy of your enemy is your friend is bullshit made up by people who want to take advantage of you. The enemy of my enemy is my friend mentality has only burned its way across the 20th century, as the CIA just would fuck with anyone who didn't align with them personally, setting up enemies of our enemies across the globe, but very few actually good allies. What about Russia? Should leftists support Russia? To which I have to say, why would you? Why would you? Putin's politics are extremely to the right. He talks about nation building. He talks about bringing back the empire of the Soviet Union. He is aggressively anti-human rights. They push their legislation against the LGBTQ community is aggressive and bad. And I'm saying that as they are in comparison to countries that are in a part of the world where the general laws and attitudes towards those groups are not good. They are worse than some of them. The recent banning of positive representation of homosexuals in Russian media is an alarming type of censorship, essentially saying your only representation is allowed to be as parasites on society. Generations growing up watching that media are not going to have a humanized version of what a gay person or a trans person or a lesbian person is. And Pussy Riot warned us about this for like a decade. Russia is also heavily bought into the whole Christian nationalist vibe that's going around, which is a whole other topic in and of itself. People who are hijacking Christianity for the purposes of, well, political purposes, to gain power and influence both America and abroad. There's actually quite a vast movement and conspiracy tied to it. You ever heard of the National Prayer Breakfast? Wherever it's going on, you will find Christian nationalists. For those who don't know, the National Prayer Breakfast is essentially an unregulated lobbyist meeting where people talk about policy and pretend that it's not politics or lobbying because they happen to be praying and eating pancakes. Yep. So no, I don't know why any leftists would support China. I don't know why any leftists would support Russia. And frankly, I don't understand how someone thinks that socialism could possibly work or exist in a system without some level of democracy. Because you see, labor is always groups of people. Well, almost always. But it is assumed statistically that there is going to be more labor than there is going to be management. Otherwise, management would seem pretty inefficient. So if the means of production are controlled by a group, a number of people, there's going to have to be some level of cooperation and democracy involved in that for it to function. When the state owns everything, that's not socialism. That's fascism with extra steps. I'm not saying there aren't some services and industries that I don't think could benefit from being controlled by the government. There totally are. Infrastructure-based things that we all use and benefit from, that we shouldn't, that having to pay directly for would be a clusterfuck. But when you sit around and you celebrate people who actively don't truly support their labor and actively pursue authoritarian steps against their own people, I don't really see where the socialism comes in. I don't really see what you're supporting. I don't really see what your goals are. You say that you believe in this thing, socialism or communism. But when you look into these things, it is very clear that these are things that are going to require human cooperation. And cooperation is only truly in existence in a democratic process with some level of democracy, because democracy is when the conversation happens. The leading point of strongman politics or fascism is that most people won't get a say. And this is entirely antithetical to both socialism and democracy. It is not valuable to be able to stand up and say, this person or this country or these people are the bad guys just because I have said they are. I have key policy and behavior reasons why I do not trust Russia and why I do not trust Hamas and why I do not trust China. I don't dislike them because they are China or Russia. I can't really say the same thing about Hamas because Hamas only exists as a military dictatorship. There's not, like I said, Hamas is not Palestine and Palestine is not Hamas. That's what I'm saying there. I would never support Hamas is my point. The point is, it is not valuable. In fact, it is a completely empty philosophical concept to base your entire belief around the concept that America is all bad. First of all, nothing is all bad. Nothing is all good. No matter how many times people tell you it's all good in the hood on a Tuesday. We live in a complex, complicated society. You have to stop and ask yourself, what is it that you really believe in? I told you earlier what I believe in. Those are the types of principles that I build out my philosophical and political beliefs around. If all your political beliefs are simply based around what you don't like, you don't have real political beliefs. You have contrarianism, and the world is full of contrarians. It is irrelevant if something is popular or unpopular. What is relevant is how does it line up with the values that you believe in. And frankly, I don't think that Russia or China align with socialism or even communism. And I don't believe that Hamas aligns with any of my beliefs, other than maybe we shouldn't treat the people who live in Gaza like prisoners in an open air prison, which is bad. Doesn't make Hamas's actions right. So please, if you spend your life going, America all bad, stop and ask yourself why. And don't be wrong, there's plenty of things wrong with America that we can list. But if your response to criticism of other countries is, yeah, but well, America, let it be known that that is not a real response. That is a whataboutism. Oh, and I didn't even mention that whole thing where China also has very little in the terms of social libertarian rights. Yeah, well, the whole crackdown on Uyghur Muslims and the fact that I think homosexuality is still not totally legal there. The point is, I don't think that China really aligns with any of my values. I don't think Russia aligns with my values. And I don't think Hamas does. Is it possible that there's one or two things that I might agree with them that I'm not factoring in here, either because I've forgotten it or I'm just not aware? Oh, yeah, totally. But when I look at the big picture, they don't seem to be building the types of worlds I would want to live in. It's important to remember that Lenin tried to make it very clear before he died that the last person who should ever be allowed to replace him was Stalin. Because he knew Stalin would never actively give up the power. And also, Stalin was a dick. But Stalin, being Stalin, politically, he politicized his way up the chain of command and became one of history's worst dictators. I think that's all I really need to say about all of this. The point, to summarize, tankies are wrong and embarrassing and make anyone who has socialist beliefs look like a fucking lunatic. Tankies don't believe in anything real because they believe in oxymoronic things like authoritarian socialism. And they just hate America. And I don't just throw out accusations that people hate America. But if your response to every argument is, well, but America, that's not a real argument. It's just not. Like, if your roommate steals from you occasionally, and then one day they catch you stealing from them, you may say, hey, but you steal from me all the time. That won't change the fact that you were both stealing. It does not erase your own actions. I don't know if that metaphor really works here at the end, but but I feel like I've gotten my point across. Some socialists need to shut the fuck up. All right. Thank you for listening or watching this episode of Ruben Uncut. If you enjoyed it, please follow on Spotify or like and subscribe on YouTube. If you wish to contact me, you can always email the show at rubenuncut@gmail.com. Or you can go harass my YouTube channel. I'll notice it eventually. If you want to, and as always, if you want to support this podcast, you can always go to my Spotify for podcasters page and, well, throw me some money. You don't have to, though. You don't get anything out of it. Besides the knowledge, you're helping support this content. Thank you. And everyone have a wonderful whatever. Except for Tankies.